Marcus Chen pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the cargo hold, listening to the familiar hum of the ship's engines. The Times Stellar Wanderer Times had been his home for 3 years now. But he still felt like an outsider among the crew. Being the only human on a ship full of alien species had its challenges, especially when everyone else seemed to think humans were weak and useless. Chen! Captain Vorthak's voice boomed through the ship's communication system. The Krillian's deep, rumbling tone always made Marcus think of rocks grinding together. Report to the bridge immediately. Marcus sighed and pushed himself off the wall. His boots clanged against the metal floor as he made his way through the narrow corridors. The ship was a modified freight hauler, built for efficiency rather than comfort. Every surface was hard metal or plastic, and the lighting cast harsh shadows everywhere. On the bridge, Captain Vorthak stood towering over the navigation console. The Krillian was nearly 8 feet tall, with thick, armored skin that looked like it could stop a laser blast. His 4 arms moved across different control panels with practiced ease. Next to him, Zixtar the engineer worked on a portable device. The insectoid alien's compound eyes reflected the blue light from his tools. "Ah, the human arrives," Vorthak said without looking up. "How fortunate." Marcus had learned to ignore the captain's sarcasm. "You called for me, sir." "Indeed, we have a problem." Vorthak finally turned around, his yellow eyes fixed on Marcus. "Our cargo scanning equipment has detected something unusual in the asteroid field we're approaching. There appears to be a derelict ship hidden among the rocks." "That's not unusual," Marcus said. "Plenty of ships get lost out here. This one is different." Zixtar clicked in his rapid-fire language before switching to Galactic Standard. "Energy readings suggest the ship is not completely dead. Something is still functioning aboard it." Our, Vorthak nodded. "Salvage rights in this sector belong to whoever finds valuable cargo first. If that ship contains anything worthwhile, we could make enough credits to upgrade this rust bucket." Marcus looked at the view screen, which showed the asteroid field ahead. Thousands of rocks tumbled through space, some as small as pebbles, others the size of small moons. Finding anything in that maze would be difficult. "What do you need me to do?" Marcus asked. "Simple," Vorthak replied. "You're going to board that derelict ship and find out what's still working. Then you'll determine if there's anything worth salvaging." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Alone?" "Of course, alone." Vorthak laughed. A sound like grinding stone. "You humans are expendable. If something goes wrong, we haven't lost anyone important." The other crew members on the bridge turned to look at Marcus. There was Threll, the Vaxian weapons specialist, whose blue skin seemed to shimmer under the lights. Her 6 tentacle-like arms were crossed in what Marcus had learned was her version of amusement. Near the communication station stood Gornix, a hulking Brutanian whose muscles bulged even under his thick environmental suit. "The human will be fine," Threll said, her voice like musical chimes. "Humans are good at crawling into small spaces, like vermin." "Indeed," Gornix rumbled. "If the ship is dangerous, better to risk the human than valuable crew members." Marcus clenched his fists but kept his expression neutral. He'd heard these comments countless times over the past 3 years. In the galactic community, humans were considered a minor species. They weren't as strong as Brutanians, as smart as Krillians, as technically gifted as the insectoid races, or as naturally armed as the Vaxians. Most aliens saw humans as useful only for simple manual labor. "When do we reach the derelict?" Marcus asked. 2 hours, Vorthak replied. "I suggest you prepare yourself. Check your environmental suit and gather whatever tools you think you'll need. The ship appears to be Terran in origin, so at least you'll be familiar with the basic layout." Marcus nodded and left the bridge. A Terran ship. That meant human-built. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was being sent to investigate something his own species had created, simply because the others considered him disposable. Back in his small quarters, Marcus began preparing his gear. His environmental suit was older than the rest of the crew's equipment, patched and repaired multiple times. The magnetic boots still worked, though one had a tendency to stick too strongly to metal surfaces. His tool belt contained the basic essentials: scanner, plasma cutter, magnetic clamps, emergency oxygen, and a small sidearm that probably wouldn't stop anything bigger than a space rat. As he checked each piece of equipment, Marcus thought about his situation. He'd joined the crew of the Times Stellar Wanderer Times after his family's mining operation had gone bankrupt. Earth's economy was struggling, and humans were finding it harder to compete with alien technology and efficiency. The only jobs available to humans in space were the dangerous ones that other species didn't want. Marcus had hoped that working hard and proving himself would eventually earn him respect from the crew. Instead, after 3 years, he was still treated as little more than a tool. Useful for dangerous work, but not worth considering as an equal. A soft chime indicated they were approaching the asteroid field. Marcus finished sealing his environmental suit and made his way to the small shuttle bay. The Times Stellar Wanderer Times carried 2 small transport pods for short-range missions. Marcus climbed into the smaller one, running through the pre-flight checklist. The pod was barely large enough for one person, with just enough life support for a few hours. It wasn't designed for comfort, just for getting someone from the main ship to wherever they needed to go. Marcus settled into the pilot's seat and activated the communications system. "Chen to bridge," he said. "Shuttle pod, ready for departure." "Excellent." Vorthak's voice crackled through the speaker. "We've located the derelict. Transmitting coordinates now. The ship appears to be lodged between 2 large asteroids. Be careful not to damage it. Or yourself. On approach." The coordinates appeared on Marcus's navigation display. The target was deep in the asteroid field, hidden in the shadow of a massive rock formation. Marcus fired up the pod's engines and launched from the Times Stellar Wanderer **. Flying through an asteroid field required constant attention. The rocks moved in complex patterns, influenced by the gravitational pull of nearby planets and each other. Marcus had to constantly adjust his course, weaving between chunks of stone and metal. His hands moved smoothly over the controls. This was one area where humans actually had an advantage. Their reflexes and adaptability made them excellent pilots in challenging conditions. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, Marcus spotted the derelict ship. It was wedged between 2 massive asteroids, held in place by their combined gravitational pull. The vessel was definitely human in design, with the angular lines and practical construction that marked Terran engineering. It looked like a deep space exploration ship, probably built in the early days of human space travel. What caught Marcus's attention immediately was the damage to the ship's hull. Long gouges ran along the sides, as if something with massive claws had raked across the metal. The scratches were too large and too regular to be from asteroid impacts. Something had attacked this ship. Marcus maneuvered his pod closer, looking for a docking port. The ship's main bay seemed intact, though the doors were closed. He activated his pod's short-range scanner and swept the derelict vessel. "Interesting," he murmured to himself. The scanner showed that while most of the ship was without power, there was definite energy activity in the lower sections. Something was still functioning down there, just as Zixtar had detected. Marcus found an emergency docking collar near the ship's stern and carefully mated his pod to it. The connection sealed properly, indicating that at least some of the derelict systems were still working. He ran a quick atmosphere check. The ship still had air, though the oxygen levels were lower than normal. "Chen to Times Stellar Wanderer **, he reported. "I've docked with the derelict. Ship appears to be a Terran exploration vessel, probably about 20 years old. There's evidence of external damage, possibly from an attack. I'm preparing to board." "Understood," Vorthak replied. "Find out what's valuable and report back. Try not to get yourself killed. I don't want to explain to the authorities why we lost our human." Marcus disconnected from the comm channel and checked his equipment one final time. The plasma cutter was fully charged, his scanner was working properly, and his emergency oxygen supply was full. He took a deep breath and opened the airlock. The derelict ship was dark inside, lit only by the pale glow of emergency lighting strips along the walls. The air smelled stale and metallic, with an underlying odor that Marcus couldn't identify. His boots clanked against the metal deck plates as he moved forward. The ship's design was familiar. Marcus had grown up around vessels like this. The corridor stretched ahead, with doors leading to various compartments. According to the basic schematic his scanner provided, he was near the ship's engineering section. The bridge would be several levels up, while the cargo holds and main laboratories were on this level. Marcus decided to head toward the source of the energy readings first. His scanner indicated the active systems were in the lower engineering section, so he made his way toward the nearest maintenance shaft. The ladder rungs were cold under his gloved hands as he descended into the ship's depths. The engineering section was larger than he'd expected. Banks of equipment lined the walls, and massive conduits ran along the ceiling. Most of it was dark and silent, but Marcus could hear a faint humming coming from somewhere ahead. He followed the sound, his scanner leading him deeper into the maze of machinery. The energy readings were getting stronger, and his scanner was picking up something else. Heat signatures that didn't match the ship's equipment patterns. Marcus rounded a corner and stopped short. Ahead of him, a large, cylindrical chamber dominated the center of the engineering bay. It was clearly not part of the original ship design. The metal was different, more advanced, and it glowed with a soft blue light. Cables and conduits had been jury-rigged to connect the alien device to the ship's power systems. "What the hell?" Marcus whispered. He approached the chamber carefully, his scanner working overtime to analyze what he was seeing. The device was definitely not human technology. The materials didn't match anything in his scanner's database, and the energy patterns were unlike anything he'd ever encountered. As Marcus got closer, he noticed that the chamber had a viewing port on one side. He moved around to get a better look, and felt his blood freeze. Inside the chamber, suspended in some kind of glowing fluid, was a creature unlike anything he'd ever seen. The thing was roughly humanoid but wrong in every way that mattered. Its limbs were too long, ending in claws that could easily make the gouges he'd seen on the ship's hull. Its skin was a mottled gray-green color, and it had far too many joints in its arms and legs. The head was elongated, with a mouth full of needle-sharp teeth. But what terrified Marcus most was that the creature's eyes were open, and they were looking directly at him. The thing in the chamber was alive, and it was aware. Marcus stepped back, his heart pounding. The creature's eyes followed his movement, and he could see intelligence there. Alien and hostile, but definitely intelligent. This wasn't just some specimen that had been captured. This was a predator, and it was studying him. His scanner beeped softly, indicating it had finished its analysis. Marcus glanced at the readout and felt his stomach drop even further. The chamber wasn't just keeping the creature alive, it was slowly breaking down the containment systems. The device was designed to hold the creature for a limited time, and that time was almost up. According to his scanner's estimates, the containment would fail within the next few hours. Marcus backed away from the chamber, his mind racing. This changed everything. The derelict ship wasn't just a salvage opportunity. It was a potential death trap. Whatever this creature was, it had destroyed the original crew and had been waiting here for someone to find it. He needed to get back to his pod and warn the others. But as he turned to leave, he heard something that made his blood run cold. The humming sound he'd been following was getting louder, and it was coming from multiple directions. His scanner showed new energy signatures activating throughout the ship. The creature's presence was somehow triggering other systems to come online. Marcus ran toward the ladder he'd used to descend to this level, but stopped when he heard metal creaking above him. Something was moving through the ship's corridors, and it was between him and his escape route. He looked around frantically, searching for another way out. The engineering section had several maintenance shafts, but his scanner showed that most of them led to dead ends or systems that were too small for him to fit through. The sound of movement was getting closer. Marcus could hear claws scraping against metal, and occasionally a low chittering sound that raised the hair on the back of his neck. There was more than one creature loose on this ship. Marcus forced himself to think. He was trapped in the lower engineering section of a derelict ship, with hostile alien creatures hunting him, and his only way out was blocked. His crew thought he was expendable and probably wouldn't come looking for him if he didn't report back on schedule. For the first time since joining the crew of the Times Stellar Wanderer *, Marcus realized that being undervalued might actually work in his favor. The aliens on his ship thought humans were weak and useless, but they'd never really tested what humans were capable of when their backs were against the wall. Marcus had grown up in the asteroid mining colonies, where equipment failures and cave-ins were constant threats. He'd learned to think fast, adapt quickly, and survive in hostile environments. His crewmates saw him as just another weak human, but they'd never seen what humans could do when they had to fight for their lives. The chittering sound was getting closer, and Marcus could now hear multiple sets of claws moving through the corridors above. Whatever these creatures were, they were coordinating their hunt. They knew he was trapped down here, and they were taking their time. Marcus smiled grimly and began checking his equipment again. His plasma cutter could be overcharged to create a makeshift explosive. His scanner could be modified to create electromagnetic interference. His magnetic clamps could be turned into improvised weapons. The crew of the Times, Stellar Wanderer Times, was about to learn something important about humans. They might look weak and expendable, but when cornered, they became incredibly dangerous. The hunt was about to begin, and Marcus Chen was done being prey. Marcus crouched behind a bank of engineering equipment, his modified scanner in one hand, and an overcharged plasma cutter in the other. The chittering sounds had grown louder, and he could now distinguish at least 3 different voices in the alien chorus. These creatures were definitely communicating with each other, which meant they were intelligent hunters, not just mindless beasts. His scanner showed heat signatures moving through the corridors above, but they seemed to be avoiding the engineering section for now. Marcus realized they were probably being cautious because this area contained the power systems for their containment chamber. They needed the machinery functional, at least until they could find another way off this derelict ship. That gave Marcus his first advantage. He knew more about human engineering systems than these creatures did, and he could use that knowledge against them. Moving carefully through the maze of equipment, Marcus made his way to the main power distribution panel. The system was old but familiar, similar to the ones he'd worked on in the mining colonies. He began rerouting power flows, creating fluctuations that would make the ship's systems unpredictable. The chittering above suddenly stopped. Marcus had gotten their attention. He could hear claws scraping against metal as the creatures moved more quickly through the corridors. They knew something was wrong, but they couldn't be sure what. Marcus smiled as he continued working on the power systems. Let them worry about what the strange human was doing down here. Marcus finished his modifications and moved to the next phase of his plan. The engineering section had several maintenance shafts that were too small for the creatures but perfect for someone of his size. The original ship designers had built these passages for routine maintenance work, but Marcus was going to use them to move around the ship without being detected. He opened a panel near the floor and crawled into the narrow shaft. The space was barely wide enough for his shoulders, and he had to push his equipment ahead of him as he moved. But it was exactly what he needed, a way to travel through the ship without exposing himself to the creatures hunting him. The maintenance shaft connected to similar passages throughout the ship. Marcus consulted his scanner and chose a route that would take him toward the ship's armory. If this was a proper exploration vessel, it would have weapons storage for dealing with hostile environments and dangerous life forms. As he crawled through the narrow passages, Marcus could hear the creatures moving through the main corridors. They were searching systematically, checking each compartment. Their coordination was impressive, but they were making noise because they weren't familiar with the ship's layout. Marcus, on the other hand, had grown up around vessels like this. He knew where everything was supposed to be. The maintenance shaft ended at a junction box near the ship's security section. Marcus quietly removed the panel and listened carefully. He could hear movement in the distance, but nothing immediate. He slipped out of the shaft and found himself in a corridor lined with storage lockers. The armory was just ahead, sealed behind a heavy blast door. Marcus approached the security panel and was relieved to find that it was still powered. The system required both a code and a biometric scan, but Marcus had learned a few tricks during his years of salvage work. He connected his modified scanner to the security panel and began running a bypass program. The system was designed to keep unauthorized personnel out, but it had never been upgraded to deal with someone who understood both human technology and alien hacking techniques. While his scanner worked on cracking the security codes, Marcus heard something that made him freeze. Footsteps were approaching. But these weren't the clicking claws of the alien creatures. Someone was walking with heavy, metallic boots. Marcus drew his sidearm and pressed himself against the wall beside the armory door. The footsteps were getting closer, moving with purpose down the corridor toward his position. His scanner indicated a single heat signature, roughly human-sized. A figure appeared around the corner, and Marcus almost fired before recognizing what he was seeing. It was human, but something was terribly wrong. The person wore a tattered environmental suit that had been patched with materials that didn't match human technology. Most disturbing of all, the helmet's faceplate was cracked, revealing glimpses of a face that looked human, but somehow alien. "Stop right there," Marcus called out, keeping his weapon trained on the figure. The person turned toward him, and Marcus got his first clear look at what used to be human. The face was recognizable as such, but the eyes were wrong. They reflected light like an animal's, and the mouth was full of teeth that were too sharp and too numerous. When the figure spoke, its voice had an odd harmonic quality that made Marcus's skin crawl. "Another human," the thing said. "I wondered when more of my kind would arrive." "You're not human anymore," Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "What happened to you?" The creature that had once been human laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I was improved, enhanced. The Devourers found me dying in the wreckage of this ship and gave me a new purpose. I help them hunt. And in return, they allow me to retain some of my original consciousness. The Devourers, the creatures you encountered below. They're not just predators, they're collectors. They study the species they encounter, learning their strengths and weaknesses. Then they create servants from the most useful specimens." Marcus felt sick as the implications hit him. "How many crew members were on this ship?" 15, the creature replied. "I'm the only one who survived the selection process. The others were less fortunate." The security panel behind Marcus beeped softly, indicating his scanner had successfully bypassed the locks. The armory door began to slide open, but Marcus didn't dare take his eyes off the mutated human in front of him. "You should surrender," the creature continued. "The process of conversion is less painful if you don't resist. The Devourers are impressed by your resourcefulness. They would like to keep your mind intact during the enhancement procedure." "Not interested," Marcus said. He fired his sidearm at the creature and dove through the opening armory door as the blast door began to close. The energy bolt struck the mutated human in the chest, but instead of falling, it merely staggered backward. Whatever the Devourers had done to enhance their servant had also made it much more resistant to damage. Marcus found himself in a well-stocked armory. Weapon racks lined the walls, containing everything from standard plasma rifles to exotic energy weapons designed for dealing with unknown threats. He quickly grabbed a military-grade pulse rifle and several extra power cells. Something slammed against the armory door from outside, but the blast door held. Marcus could hear the enhanced human scratching at the metal with claws that definitely hadn't been part of its original anatomy. "You can't hide in there forever," the creature called through the door. "The Devourers are very patient, and they're already working on opening your ship's docking port. Your crewmates will make excellent specimens." Marcus felt a surge of anger. His crew might think he was expendable, but he wasn't going to let them be turned into monsters by these alien predators. He needed to get back to his shuttle pod and warn the Time's Stellar Wanderer Times before it was too late. He examined the armory more carefully, looking for anything that might help him escape. In addition to the weapons, there were several suits of combat armor and various specialized equipment. One item caught his attention immediately. A portable plasma cannon designed for breaching ship hulls. Marcus smiled as a plan began to form. If he couldn't go through the creatures hunting him, maybe he could go around them. He suited up in one of the combat armor sets, pleased to find that it still had power and functional systems. The armor's built-in scanner was much more sophisticated than his handheld unit, and it could interface directly with the ship's remaining computer systems. Connecting to the ship's database, Marcus learned the full story of what had happened here. The exploration vessel Times Deep Horizon Times had been investigating reports of alien artifacts in this star system. They'd found something all right. A Devourer scout ship that had been waiting for prey to arrive. The Devourers were an ancient species that had perfected the art of biological warfare. They didn't just kill their enemies, they studied them, learned from them, and incorporated their best traits into new servant species. The enhanced human outside was just one example of their work, but the database also contained information about devourer weaknesses. The creatures were vulnerable to certain electromagnetic frequencies, and their enhanced servants could be disrupted by specific energy patterns. The original crew of the Times, Deep Horizon Times, had discovered this information during their brief fight for survival. Marcus programmed the armor's systems with the frequency data and began preparing his escape. The portable plasma cannon could cut through the ship's hull, allowing him to exit directly into space rather than trying to fight his way back through creature-infested corridors. He positioned the cannon near what should be an external bulkhead and began charging it up. The weapon hummed with increasing power as energy built up in its capacitors. Marcus could hear more scratching and pounding outside the armory door. The creatures were trying to break in, but the blast door was holding for now. When the plasma cannon reached full charge, Marcus triggered it. A brilliant beam of superheated plasma lanced out, melting through the ship's hull like a knife through butter. Atmosphere began rushing out through the hole, but Marcus's armor protected him from decompression. He grabbed additional weapons and equipment, stuffing everything into a portable equipment pack. Then he activated the armor's magnetic clamps and stepped through the hole into space. The sight that greeted him outside was both beautiful and terrifying. The asteroid field stretched in all directions, with the Times Stellar Wanderer Times visible in the distance. But between Marcus and his ship, he could see other shapes moving among the rocks. More devourer vessels, sleek and predatory, closing in on his crewmates. Marcus activated his armor's communication system and tried to contact the Times Stellar Wanderer Asterisk, but something was jamming his signals. The Devourers were already implementing their attack plan, cutting off communications while they moved their ships into position. Using the armor's thrusters, Marcus began making his way across the hull of the derelict ship toward his docked shuttle pod. The distance was only a few hundred meters, but he had to be careful not to be spotted by the Devourer ships. As he moved, Marcus could see through the ship's viewports. The creatures were moving through the corridors, searching for him. They would discover his escape route soon, but hopefully not before he could reach his pod. The shuttle was exactly where he'd left it, still sealed to the docking collar. Marcus quickly made his way inside and began the startup sequence. The pod's engines came online just as he saw movement outside. Several Devourer creatures had reached the hull and were trying to break into his vessel. Marcus fired the pod's engines and pulled away from the derelict ship. The creatures tried to hang onto the shuttle, but the acceleration was too much for them. They fell away, tumbling back toward the larger vessel. Now came the hard part. Marcus had to reach the Times Stellar Wanderer Times before the Devourer ships could complete their attack. His small shuttle pod was fast and maneuverable, but it had no weapons and minimal armor. He would have to rely on speed and surprise. As he raced through the asteroid field, Marcus could see the Devourer vessels moving to intercept him. They were unlike any ships he'd ever encountered. Organic-looking things that seemed to flow through space rather than flying. Their hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and he could see weapon ports that looked disturbingly like mouths. One of the alien ships moved to block his path, energy weapons charging with an ominous glow. Marcus threw his shuttle into a tight turn, using a large asteroid as cover. The Devourer ship fired, but its energy blast struck the rock instead of his pod. Marcus used the momentary cover to change course, diving toward a cluster of smaller asteroids. His shuttle was small enough to thread between rocks that would force the larger Devourer ships to go around. It was a dangerous game, but his years of experience flying in asteroid fields gave him an advantage. The Times Stellar Wanderer Times was getting closer, but Marcus could see that it was already under attack. Energy blasts lit up space around the freight hauler as it exchanged fire with two Devourer vessels. Captain Vorthak was fighting back, but the alien ships were clearly more advanced. Marcus activated his pod's emergency beacon, hoping to get his crew's attention. The signal would also alert the Devourers to his exact position, but he needed to warn his shipmates about what they were really facing. Asterisk Stellar Wanderer Asterisk, this is Chen. He broadcast on all frequencies, hoping something would get through the jamming. The derelict ship is a trap. The creatures on board are called Devourers. They're trying to capture our ship and crew for biological experiments, Static answered him. But he saw the Times Stellar Wanderer Times change course slightly. Someone had heard his transmission. A Devourer ship suddenly appeared directly ahead of Marcus, rising from behind an asteroid like a predator emerging from ambush. Marcus yanked his controls hard to the left, feeling the shuttle's frame groan under the stress. The alien vessel's weapons fired, missing him by mere meters. Marcus was now close enough to the Times Stellar Wanderer Times to see his crewmates through the bridge viewports. Captain Vorthak was shouting orders while Threll worked at the weapons console. They were fighting hard, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. That was about to change. Marcus had brought more than just information back from the derelict ship. He had weapons designed specifically for fighting Devourers, and he was about to show his crew what humans were really capable of when their backs were against the wall. The time for being undervalued was over. Now it was time to hunt. Marcus guided his shuttle pod toward the Times Stellar Wanderer's Times docking bay, but the ship was taking heavy fire from 2 Devourer vessels. Energy blasts scorched the hull around the bay doors, making a safe landing impossible. He needed another way aboard, and he needed to help his crew fight off the attackers. The combat armor he'd taken from the derelict ship had thrusters powerful enough for short-range space work. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. He was going to spacewalk directly onto his ship's hull while under enemy fire. He grabbed the pulse rifle and the portable plasma cannon, securing them to his armor with magnetic clamps. The equipment pack, containing the Devourer frequency data and additional weapons, went on his back. Then he opened his shuttle pod's airlock and stepped into the vacuum of space. The scene around him was like something from a nightmare. The Devourer ships moved through space with an organic fluidity that was deeply unsettling. Their hulls pulsed with colors that shifted and changed, and their weapons fired beams of energy that looked more like living tissue than manufactured technology. Marcus fired his armor's thrusters and launched himself toward the Times Stellar Wanderer Asterisk. Energy blasts from the Devourer ships lit up space around him, but they seemed to be focused on the larger target. His armor's stealth systems helped mask his approach. He landed hard on the ship's hull near the main airlock. Through the metal, he could feel the vibrations of weapons fire and the strain of the ship's engines working at maximum power. Captain Vorthak was pushing the old freight hauler beyond its design limits. Marcus sealed himself into the airlock and cycled through. The moment the inner door opened, he was met by Gornix, the Brutanian security officer. The huge alien was armed with a heavy plasma cannon and looked ready for a fight. Human. Gornix rumbled in surprise. Where did you come from? The captain said you were trapped on the derelict ship. I found a way out, Marcus replied, pushing past the Brutanian. We need to get to the bridge immediately. I have information about these attackers. Gornix followed him through the corridors, his heavy boots clanging against the deck plates. The ship shuddered around them as another energy blast struck the hull. Emergency lighting flickered, and Marcus could hear the strain in the ship's structural supports. On the bridge, chaos reigned. Captain Vorthak stood at the command position, his forearms working multiple control stations simultaneously. Sweat beaded on his armored skin as he tried to coordinate their defense. Threll was at the weapons console, her tentacle arms dancing across the controls as she returned fire on the attacking ships. Zixtar, the engineer, was running diagnostics on a portable unit while making repairs to damaged systems. His compound eyes reflected the red glow of warning lights throughout the bridge. Chen, Vorthak boomed when he saw Marcus enter. You survived. How did you escape from the derelict? The creatures on that ship are called Devourers, Marcus said, moving to the tactical display. They're not just predators. They're collectors. They study species and turn them into servants. That's what they're trying to do to us. Impossible, Threll chimed. You humans always exaggerate threats. These are probably just scavengers looking for easy prey. Another blast shook the ship, and sparks flew from an overloaded console. Marcus pulled out his portable scanner and began interfacing with the ship's systems. I found frequency data on the derelict ship, he said. The original crew discovered weaknesses in Devourer biology before they were killed. Their weapons and defenses operate on specific electromagnetic frequencies. If we can modulate our weapons to match these patterns, we can hurt them. Vorthak looked skeptical. Human technology from a 20-year-old exploration vessel? Our weapons are far more advanced. Your weapons are more powerful, Marcus corrected. But they're not designed for fighting devourers. These creatures have been perfecting biological warfare for thousands of years. Raw power isn't enough. You need precision. The ship shuddered again, and Marcus saw through the view screen that one of the devourer vessels had moved closer. The alien ship's hull was opening, revealing what looked like massive weapon ports, shaped like feeding mouths. Energy was building up inside them, creating an ominous glow. They're charging some kind of main weapon, Zixtar chittered urgently. Energy readings are off the scale. Marcus looked at the tactical display and realized what was happening. It's not a weapon. It's a capture beam. They're trying to disable our engines so they can board us. Boarding? Gornix rumbled. Let them come. I'll show these creatures what happens when they face a Brutanian warrior. You don't understand, Marcus said. They don't want to kill us. They want to study us, experiment on us, and turn us into servants like they did to the crew of that derelict ship. I saw what they did to a human. He was still conscious, but he'd been changed into something else. For the first time since Marcus had known him, Captain Vorthak looked genuinely worried. The Krillian's yellow eyes fixed on the approaching devourer ship. What do you recommend? Vorthak asked. Marcus was surprised by the question. In 3 years of service, the captain had never asked for his opinion on anything important. But he didn't have time to savor the moment. I need access to the weapons control systems, Marcus said. I can modify our energy output to match the frequencies that can penetrate their defenses. But I'll need Threll to handle the targeting while I work on the modifications. Threll's tentacles stopped moving across her console. You want me to trust human modifications to our weapons systems? Yes, Marcus said simply. Because if you don't, we're all going to end up like the crew of the Times Deep Horizon Asterisk. Another impact rocked the ship, and this time the lights flickered and stayed dim. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the bridge in red light. Through the view screen, they could see the devourer ship's capture beam beginning to form. A writhing tendril of energy that reached out toward them like a living thing. Do it, Vorthak ordered. Threll, assist the human. Zixtar, reroute power to weapons. Gornix, prepare boarding defenses in case they get through. Marcus moved to the weapons console beside Threll. The Vaxian looked at him with her large, multifaceted eyes, but she didn't object as he began connecting his scanner to the system. I need you to maintain target locks on both enemy ships, Marcus told her. When I give the signal, fire everything we have at the closer vessel. The modifications should allow our weapons to penetrate their defenses, but we'll only get one good shot before they adapt. Threll's tentacles moved gracefully across her controls. Target locks established. But if your modifications fail, we'll have wasted our best opportunity to damage them. They won't fail, Marcus said, uploading the frequency data to the ship's weapon systems. The crew of the Times, Deep Horizon Times, died to get this information. I'm not going to waste their sacrifice. The weapon systems began cycling as Marcus's modifications took effect. The ship's energy output shifted, matching the patterns he'd found in the derelict's database. On the tactical display, he could see their weapons charging with a different harmonic signature than before. The Devourer ship's capture beam was almost fully formed now, reaching across space toward the Time's stellar wanderer asterisk. Where it touched their hull, Marcus could see metal beginning to soften and flow like liquid. The alien technology was rewriting the molecular structure of their ship. Fire! Marcus shouted. Threll triggered the weapons systems. And the Time's stellar wanderer's modified energy beams lanced out toward the closer Devourer vessel. Instead of splashing harmlessly across its hull like their previous shots, the beams punched through the alien ship's defenses like they weren't there. The Devourer ship convulsed as the energy struck its vital systems. The organic-looking hull split open in several places, revealing the twisted internal structure beneath. The capture beam flickered and died as the alien vessel lost power. Impossible. Zix-Tar chittered in amazement. The humans' modifications worked. Our weapons are actually damaging them, but the second Devourer ship was already adapting. Marcus could see its hull shifting, changing color and texture, as it modified its defenses to counter their new weapon frequencies. They're learning, Marcus said grimly. We need to hit the second ship now, before it finishes adapting. Target locked, Threll reported, her voice now carrying a note of respect that hadn't been there before. Wait, Marcus said, studying the tactical display. Look at how it's adapting. It's changing the entire hull structure to counter our frequency modifications. So? Gornix asked. So it's weakening other defenses to strengthen against our weapons, Marcus explained. If we hit it with conventional energy blasts, instead of the modified frequencies, we might be able to overload its adaptation systems. Vorthak stared at him. You want us to use our original weapon settings? Krasan. Trust me, Marcus said. I've been studying these creatures. They're very good at adapting to known threats, but they have trouble dealing with rapid tactical changes. Threll switched the weapons back to their original frequency settings. The second Devourer ship had finished its adaptation and was moving closer. Its hull now a different color and texture than before. Fire standard energy blasts, Marcus ordered. Their weapons struck the Devourer ship, and this time the effect was devastating. The alien vessel had adapted so completely to counter their modified frequencies that it had become vulnerable to conventional weapons. Energy beams punched through its hull, causing massive internal explosions. Both Devourer ships were now drifting, badly damaged and venting atmosphere into space. But Marcus knew they weren't finished yet. We need to get out of here, he said. There will be more ships coming. And these two can still repair themselves if we give them time. The engines are damaged, Zix-Tar reported. We can't achieve full power. Marcus looked at the tactical display, thinking fast. The asteroid field that had hidden the derelict ship could also provide cover for their escape. But they needed to move quickly. I can guide us through the asteroid field, Marcus said. I know the navigation patterns from my approach to the derelict. Vorthak looked at him for a long moment. You want to pilot my ship through an asteroid field while our engines are damaged? I want to save all our lives, Marcus replied. My shuttle pod made it through the field twice today. I can get this ship through. The captain made his decision. Take the helm. Zix-Tar. Give him whatever engine power you can manage. Threll. Monitor for more enemy contacts. Gornix. Check on the damage to our hull. As Marcus took control of the ship's navigation systems, he felt a strange sense of satisfaction. For the first time since joining the crew, he was being treated as a valuable member of the team rather than expendable labor. The Time's Stellar Wanderer Times limped into the asteroid field, with Marcus carefully threading between the massive rocks. Behind them, the two damaged Devourer ships were beginning to show signs of self-repair, but they were moving slowly and couldn't pursue effectively. How did you know their adaptation systems would work that way? Threll asked as they navigated deeper into the asteroid field. Marcus smiled. Growing up in mining colonies teaches you a lot about adaptation and survival. When you're constantly dealing with equipment failures and dangerous conditions, you learn to think about backup systems and failure modes. The Devourers are very sophisticated, but they're still following predictable patterns. The human is correct, Vorthak said, and Marcus was surprised to hear approval in the captain's voice. I have underestimated both the threat we faced and the resources we have for dealing with such threats. They had reached the far side of the asteroid field when Zix-Tar's scanners detected new contacts approaching. 3 more Devourer ships were moving toward their position, and these looked larger and more heavily armed than the first 2. Can we outrun them? Gornix asked. Marcus checked their engine status and shook his head. Not with the damage we've taken. We need another solution. He looked at the weapons he'd brought from the derelict ship. The portable plasma cannon was designed for hull breaching, but it could be modified for other purposes. The frequency data contained more than just weapon modifications. It also included information about Devourer communication systems and navigation protocols. I have an idea, Marcus said. but it's going to require everyone to trust me completely. Vorthak turned to look at him. After what you've accomplished today, human, I think that trust has been earned. What do you need? Marcus worked frantically at the communications console, his hands flying over controls as he implemented his desperate plan. The 3 approaching Devourer ships were larger than the first wave, and their energy signatures suggested they were hunter-killer variants designed specifically for capturing prey. What exactly are you doing? Threll asked, her tentacles poised over the weapon's controls. The frequency data from the derelict includes their communication protocols, Marcus explained. I'm sending them a message that should confuse them long enough for us to escape. You're talking to them? Gornix rumbled in disbelief. What could you possibly say to creatures like that? Marcus smiled grimly. I'm telling them that we're already infected with a biological agent that makes us unsuitable for conversion. Specifically, I'm claiming that we've been exposed to something called the human adaptation viruses, a fictional disease that supposedly makes other species incompatible with devourer enhancement procedures. Vorthak's forearms paused over his control stations. Will they believe such a deception? They should, Marcus said. The devourers are very cautious about biological contamination. They've spent thousands of years perfecting their conversion processes, and they won't risk contaminating their own biology with unknown pathogens. The message includes technical data that should convince them we're telling the truth. On the tactical display, they could see the 3 devourer ships slowing their approach. Energy patterns around their hulls shifted as they began running their own scans, trying to verify Marcus's false claims. It's working. Zixtar chittered excitedly. They're maintaining distance while they analyze our biosignatures. How long will the deception last? Vorthak asked. Not long, Marcus admitted. Once they realize there's no actual contamination, they'll resume their attack. But it should buy us enough time to reach the jump point. The Times Stellar Wanderer Times continued limping through space, her engines working at barely 50% capacity. Marcus had plotted a course that would take them to the nearest hyperspace jump point, but they needed at least 20 more minutes to reach it. Behind them, the Devourer ships were conducting detailed scans, their organic hulls pulsing with different colors as various sensor systems came online. Marcus could see additional ships approaching from deeper in the star system. The Devourers were calling in reinforcements. Sir, Threll announced. I'm detecting at least 6 more ships converging on our position. They're surrounding the jump point. Marcus studied the tactical display. The Devourers weren't just hunting them anymore. They were setting up an elaborate trap. Even if the Times Stellar Wanderer Times reached the jump point, enemy ships would be waiting for them. They've figured out our destination, Marcus said. We need a new plan. He looked at the portable plasma cannon he'd brought from the derelict ship. The weapon was designed for breaching hulls, but it had enough power to do serious damage to ship systems if used correctly. An idea began forming in his mind. Captain, Marcus said, I need you to change course. Head directly toward the largest of the pursuing ships. You want us to attack them? Gornix asked. With damaged engines and limited weapons? Not exactly, Marcus replied. I want to get close enough to use this plasma cannon as a boarding weapon. If I can get aboard one of their ships, I can disable it from the inside and maybe create enough confusion for us to escape. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of systems and the distant sound of the engines straining. Every member of the crew was staring at Marcus. That's suicide, Threll said finally. Even if you could board their ship, you'd be facing dozens of creatures designed for combat. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But humans have one advantage that devourers don't expect. We're completely unpredictable when we're desperate. Vorthak studied him with his yellow eyes. You would risk your life for a crew that has treated you as expendable for 3 years? Marcus met the captain's gaze steadily. You're my crew, and despite how you've treated me, we're all in this together now. The Krillian captain was quiet for a moment, then he nodded slowly. Zixtar, prepare the emergency pod for a high-speed launch. Threll, target the largest devourer ship's weapon systems. Gornix, gather whatever portable weapons we have available. Sir, Marcus said, there's one more thing. The frequency data includes information about Devourer internal ship layouts. Their vessels are grown rather than built, which means they follow organic patterns. If I can reach their central nervous system, I can disrupt their entire ship. As the crew prepared for Marcus's desperate mission, he suited up in the combat armor again and checked his equipment. The portable plasma cannon would serve as both a breaching tool and a weapon. His pulse rifle was loaded with energy cells modified to the Devourer vulnerability frequencies. Most importantly, he carried a data storage device containing a computer virus designed specifically for biological ship systems. The emergency pod was barely large enough for one person, designed for short-range evacuation rather than combat missions. Marcus squeezed inside with his equipment and ran through the launch checklist. Chen, Vorthak's voice came through the communication system. I owe you an apology. I have spent 3 years believing that humans were inferior to other species. I was wrong. Thank you, sir, Marcus replied. But save the apologies for after we get out of this alive. The Times Stellar Wanderer Times changed course, accelerating toward the largest Devourer ship. The alien vessel was nearly 3 times the size of their freight hauler, its hull covered with weapon ports that looked like organic growths. As they approached, energy beams lanced out from the Devourer ship, but Threll's return fire forced them to adjust their targeting. Launching in 10 seconds, Marcus announced. The emergency pod shot out of the Times Stellar Wanderer Times like a bullet, its small engines accelerating it toward the Devourer ship at tremendous speed. Marcus felt the G-forces crushing him into his seat as the pod covered the distance in mere seconds. He aimed for a section of the alien hull that looked less heavily armored than the rest. The pod struck with tremendous force, its reinforced nose punching through the organic hull material. Marcus triggered the plasma cannon immediately, cutting a larger hole that would allow him to exit the pod. The interior of the Devourer ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The corridors were curved and flowing, with surfaces that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The air was thick and humid, filled with scents that made his stomach churn. Most disturbing of all were the sounds, not the mechanical hums and beeps of a normal starship, but something that sounded almost like breathing. The entire vessel was alive in a way that went beyond simple biological components. Marcus oriented himself using the deck plans he'd memorized from the frequency data. The ship's central nervous system should be located deep in the core, surrounded by the most heavily protected sections. But first, he needed to deal with the creatures that would be coming to investigate his breach. He didn't have to wait long. A chittering sound echoed through the corridors, growing louder as multiple Devourers converged on his position. Marcus found an intersection that would force them to approach from predictable directions and set up a defensive position. The first creature appeared around a corner, and Marcus got his first clear look at a living Devourer. It was even more horrible than the one he'd seen in the containment chamber. The thing moved with fluid grace despite its twisted anatomy, and its multiple eyes tracked him with disturbing intelligence. Marcus fired his modified pulse rifle, and the energy beam struck the creature's center mass. The Devourer convulsed and collapsed, but more were already appearing from other directions. These creatures were learning from their companions' destruction, approaching more cautiously and trying to coordinate their attack. Marcus threw a modified scanner down one corridor, programmed to emit the same electromagnetic frequency that had disrupted the ship's weapons earlier. The device created enough interference to confuse the approaching Devourers, buying him time to move deeper into the ship. The corridors became more twisted and organic as he approached the central core. The walls pulsed with visible blood vessels, and Marcus could hear what sounded like a massive heartbeat echoing through the structure. This wasn't just a biological ship. It was a living organism that had been shaped into a vessel. A new sound reached his ears. The enhanced human from the derelict ship was somewhere ahead of him. Its voice echoed through the corridors, calling out orders in a language that combined human words with alien harmonics. The human intruder is approaching the core, the thing called. Protect the neural center at all costs. The ship must not be compromised. Marcus realized that the converted human was serving as a coordinator for the Devourer forces. It understood both human tactics and alien biology, making it the perfect bridge between the two species. If he could eliminate it, the remaining creatures would be much less effective. Following the voice, Marcus made his way through a series of chambers that looked more like organ systems than ship compartments. Massive vessels pulsed with fluids, and organic machinery performed functions he couldn't identify. The smell was overwhelming, but his armor's filtration systems kept him functional. He found the enhanced human in a chamber filled with neural interfaces, organic connection points that allowed the creature to communicate directly with the ship's systems. The thing was partially merged with the living machinery, cables and tubes connected to various points on its modified anatomy. "You've come far, human," the creature said without turning around. "But you cannot stop what is already in motion. Your crew will be taken, studied, and improved. Some may even retain enough consciousness to thank us for the enhancement." "I don't think so," Marcus replied, raising his plasma cannon. The enhanced human finally turned to face him, and Marcus saw that its transformation was even more extensive than he'd initially realized. Half its face was covered with organic machinery that pulsed with the same rhythm as the ship's heartbeat. Multiple eyes had been grafted onto its skull, giving it nearly complete peripheral vision. "You cannot kill me," the creature said. "I am no longer truly alive in the way you understand it. I am part of this ship now, connected to every system and every sensor." "Maybe," Marcus admitted, "but I can disconnect you." He fired the plasma cannon at the neural interfaces surrounding the enhanced human. The superheated beam sliced through the organic cables, severing the creature's connection to the ship's systems. The enhanced human screamed, a sound that was part agony and part electronic feedback. Without its coordinator, the ship's responses became chaotic. Marcus could hear creatures moving through the corridors without direction, colliding with each other in their confusion. The ship's own systems began fluctuating as automated processes conflicted with each other. Marcus made his way to the central neural core, a massive chamber dominated by what looked like an enormous brain suspended in fluid. This was the ship's true control center, the biological computer that governed all its functions. He connected his data storage device to one of the neural interfaces and began uploading the computer virus he'd prepared. The virus was designed to exploit the same biological weaknesses that made devourers vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies. As the virus spread through the ship's neural network, Marcus could feel the entire vessel beginning to convulse. The heartbeat sound became irregular, and the bioluminescent patterns on the walls flickered chaotically. Emergency systems activated throughout the ship, and Marcus realized he had only minutes before the devourer vessel either expelled him into space or collapsed entirely. He needed to get back to his pod and return to the Time's Stellar Wanderer asterisk. But when he reached the breach point where he'd entered the ship, Marcus discovered that his emergency pod had been destroyed. The other Devourer ships had targeted it with precision weapons, eliminating his escape route. He was trapped aboard a dying alien vessel, with no way to return to his crew. Marcus activated his armor's communication systems and managed to contact the Time's Stellar Wanderer Times on an emergency frequency. "This is Chen. Mission accomplished, but my pod is destroyed. The Devourer ship is going down, and I can't get off." Vorthak's voice crackled through the static. "We see the ship's distress. We're moving to extract you, but we'll have to get close to the hull." "Negative," Marcus replied. "The other Devourer ships will target you if you approach. Get to the jump point while you can." Absolutely not," the captain's voice was firm. "No crew member gets left behind. Threll, target the remaining ships. Zixtar, give me everything the engines have. We're going in." Through the breach in the hull, Marcus could see the Time's Stellar Wanderer Times approaching at dangerous speed, her weapons firing at the remaining Devourer vessels. The old freight hauler was heavily outgunned, but her crew was fighting with desperate determination. Marcus used his plasma cannon to widen the breach in the hull, creating a larger opening for extraction. When the Time's Stellar Wanderer Times came within range, he activated his armor's thrusters and launched himself across the gap between ships. Strong hands caught him as he crashed into his ship's cargo bay. Gornix had positioned himself to catch Marcus as he made the desperate jump. The Brutanian's massive strength absorbed the impact and pulled Marcus safely aboard. "Welcome back, human," Gornix rumbled. "The crew was not complete without you." "Go." "Crew was not complete without you." As the Time's Stellar Wanderer Times accelerated away from the dying Devourer ship, Marcus looked back to see the alien vessel collapsing in on itself. The virus he'd uploaded had completely disrupted its biological systems, turning its own organic technology against it. The remaining Devourer ships attempted to pursue, but they were too late. The Time's stellar wanderer Times reached the jump point and disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the alien hunters behind. On the bridge, Marcus was greeted as a hero by his crewmates. Captain Vorthak approached him with something Marcus had never seen before. Respect. Marcus Chen, the captain said formally. I hereby promote you to the position of security chief. Your understanding of combat tactics and alien technologies makes you invaluable to this crew. Threll extended one of her tentacles toward Marcus, the Vaxian equivalent of a handshake. I was wrong about humans, she chimed. You have proven that your species possesses qualities we had not recognized. Zixtar chittered approvingly. The humans' modifications to our systems were brilliant. I would be honored to work with you on future technical projects. Even Gornix nodded his massive head. You fight with the heart of a warrior, Marcus Chen. I respect that. As the Time's stellar wanderer Times traveled through hyperspace toward their next destination, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just one day. He'd started the morning as an expendable crew member, doing dangerous work for an indifferent captain. Now he was the ship's security chief, respected by aliens who had previously considered him worthless. But more importantly, he'd discovered something about himself and his species. Humans might not be the strongest or the smartest or the most technically advanced race in the galaxy. But when cornered, when fighting for their lives and the lives of others, humans became something that even ancient predators like the Devourers couldn't understand or predict. They became hunters. Marcus settled into his new quarters, larger than his old room and equipped with proper security systems, and began planning improvements to the ship's defenses. The galaxy was full of threats like the Devourers, and the crew of the Time's stellar wanderer Times would be ready for them. After all, they had a human on their team now. And everyone was beginning to understand that humans were not to be undervalued. The solo human had emerged as the ultimate hunter, and the galaxy would never look at his species the same way again.